Okay, hi guys from myself as well. My name is Felix, for those of you who don't know me, and I am on the Miradi team. So yes, as Annette has mentioned, we are about to release 4.4. We hope that, and I can't really promise that, but I hope that this will take place, well, rather sooner than later. Let me just share my screen with you.
If you hover down the bottom of your screen, you should see a button. Yep. Okay, so we can see a PowerPoint now.
All right. So yes, we are hoping to release Miradi 4.4 in hopefully November, fingers crossed. We had a whole bunch of volunteers go through the alpha testing of the very latest release.
Do you want to go to slideshow mode, Felix?
Yep.
You're still in. Yep. It'll just be easier to read.
Yeah, and in a second.
Right.
And so yeah, once we have reviewed their feedback, and we hope there's no major showstoppers, any bugs that they may have identified. So far, it looks very good. We are hopefully releasing November-ish, let's say. Okay, let's dive into what 4.4 is all about. Why we redesigned, or why we focused on monitoring and work plan, or changes in the work plan. There's really just a couple of main goals that we had, and after that I'm going to switch over to Miradi and really show you the changes inside Miradi sort of live. First of all, there was a need, or the idea was to share data with Miradi Share for a more program-based work planning, so one level higher than the project-based Miradi project files that some of you are using. We also wanted to enable users to really enter who and when planning entries from pretty much all around the software. So in every view that you're in, you can now assign a who's going to do the work, and when is this going to happen. So you can do this from the diagramming mode. You can do this while you're in the strategic planning or in the work planning. So that's another major change really. And we wanted to build the monitoring plans or align them with the action plan. So well, the strategies, activities, and everything, all of the elements that are part of a monitoring plan are sort of like in line with an action-based work plan. I'm going to show you how this looks in just a second. And then there's a little bit of layouting. When I say a little bit, it looks like a little bit. It's actually quite a lot of work for the developers to do that. But I think they've done a great job to do, well, when the user interface changes, it's much more smoother. The colors are actually a little downgraded, so it's not so aggressive in your eyes. And it's just really much more easier and nicer for the eye and to read and to navigate and see everything. And with that comes some editing changes or possibilities as well. So just quickly, let me take you through the general thought, because Annette already mentioned it. There is a couple of new elements coming with Miradi 4.4. And that is mainly focused on the monitoring. And so I'm just going to guide you through the overall logic or how the different elements and views are linked to each other. So this shouldn't be anything new. If you just look at the big, and I hope you can read it. If not, just I'm going to read you guys through it. As a general thinking, we all know the results chains. And that with a results chain and, well, the expected intermediate outcomes that we hope how a strategy would pan out. With every results chain, there's at least one or two or three strategies connected to it. So that's of course not changing. We're not changing away or taking away results chains with the 4.4 release. But there's minor changes within this the strategy. So you all guys know that goals, objectives, and indicators are linked to certain intermediate outcomes in a results chain. That's of course not changing. But what is actually a major change now is in the activity level. You see that there is a new little element called a monitoring activity. So basically, reacts or works the same as the regular activity, but it's really focusing on the monitoring part that you're doing. And by creating this this new element, we're basically taking away layers of in the hierarchy. So it's much easier to differentiate in between the activities that you do and the monitoring activities that you do within within the strategy. And then for both, there is one level low. There is a task, or you can assign a task to either an activity or a monitoring activity that describes really what you're doing. So the action in service of an activity, as it's spelled out here. And then what is also new, if we go over here, you see that there is now people that you can include. The system itself calls it a resource. It is, of course, well, the staff members, your team that works. So we want to have this work being reflected in the monitoring plan and in the work plan and the strategic plan, and also, well, the time that this person spends on it, and well, together with its time, of course, the funding that is needed for in terms of payment, but also other expenses. So there's project-related expenses, that your flight, printing costs, whatever it is. And so all of these elements are now also neatly lined up in the work plan. Okay, so just so that you have an overview on how things work, I'm going to this PF view just for well, 2 more slides, and then we're going to move over to Miradi, because I want to demo you the before and after views. And so when I told you that we added the new monitoring activity to take away the multi-layers that we had in 4.3 and all of the versions before. So you see there was a strategy, an activity, and then a task, and then a subtask. And to both you could, or within that you could link an indicator and a method to it, which I mean it worked. With 4, I think what was really achieved is a much cleaner overview on hierarchy. So you see that we have a strategy and regular activity, and with it a couple of tasks. And then if it comes to a monitoring activity, the same hierarchy applies. You have a monitoring activity, and with it you have a task. And then there's one or more indicators that are being catered for by this activity. So by implementing the activity, you're actually taking up, or you might take up data for one or even more indicators. So the linkage is being made right here. And then you see that, well, in the tree view, the hierarchy, but I think we see that better in Miradi. You see that there's the project, the resources, the little people here, and the expenses lined up neatly in the tree view as well. Going one step further, of course, we also want to see how the calculations or how the numbers add up. So that's actually, I'm going to get to that in just a second. So one thing is the work units and the expenses. So the totals by each results. Before that, it was sort of not messy, but not as detailed as it was needed by some of our users. So there was a clear need for folks to really show the totals of each activity, the totals of each strategy, and then the totals of multiple strategies within one results chain, and that is now possible to be shown. It's a little bit more numbers in the table, but it really helps to really clearly demonstrate where the costs arise and where the costs come from. What else is new? I think that's pretty much it from the PDF. The rest I'm going to just do live in Miradi. So I hope you see my screen. Okay, great. So this is Miradi 4.4. The major looks haven't changed yet, but there's slight little changes, as I said, that I want to run you through. So first thing I think that is obvious is the color changes, or the design changes in color on the right-hand side. It's a little bit less flashy, but much calmer in a way. The same, by the way, applies to the threat rating, which I think is really nice. So the threat rating is really well downsized in color a little bit, and it's really much more appealing, at least I find. But yes, in the work plan, basically you see the tree view now. If I run down, the tree view now has new little activities, which are the monitoring activities here in purple. And if I move up again, our resources or the assignments, who is going to take care of this, also now integrated into the tree view, which wasn't the case in earlier versions. What is also new is that you can display only a selected results chain, which is actually one of the most needed features from my personal work on the last two projects. So we can now either show all the diagrams or just a specific results chain to, first of all, make it easier in the output files. If you create a RTF output, you don't have to delete all of the other results chains that are in your project file. But it also increases the speed of the reaction of Miradi, so it becomes a little bit faster by not having to display all of the additional information. So that's quite nice, I find. Then on the very high level, if I click on a results chain, there's minor changes that you might discover if you really dig deep. So I'm going to show it to you. The progress report now has, apart from the status and the details, it also features two new options, and that is the next steps and the lessons learned. So in line with adaptive management and the overall principles of the open standards, I think if we really use Miradi to the full extent, this is something that we should or must incorporate, especially at this level where we are in the field really working and not in the planning phase anymore. So the next steps and the lessons learned is well, two more fields that we added. And apart from that, I think there's not much more. You see the expenses, they also show up here. If I go over to the diagram view, and if I double click on a strategy, going to the activities box, you see that here's all our activities lined up, and we have a little tiny little tick box here that you can either mark an activity as a monitoring activity or leave it as a regular activity as you know them from before. We recommend to use the ID field to differentiate in between monitoring activities and others, but that's of course up to you guys how you want to use it. And then if we show these on the page and we zoom out, just as regular activities, they show up on your diagram, and you can move them around and place them and lay out your results chains. So yeah, running out of time.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thanks, Felix. There is a question there from Veronica saying, is there a way to include a monitoring activity not related to a specific strategy? I think I have seen in one example where somebody created basically a monitoring strategy and put all their common monitoring stuff in one place. Have you seen other ways to do that?
No, it's a very good question. So we still don't allow an activity to be created by its own. So you always have to be in a strategy in order to create an activity for a multitude of reasons to really keep it that way. But yeah, as you suggest, the solution would be to create a strategy that is focused on, I don't know, any single activities that you might have, or if they're all monitoring activities, then just call it a monitoring strategy and just summarize it all in that strategy. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, we're pretty much out of time. We might have time for one more quick question if anyone sticks it into the Q&A box. But otherwise, while that's happening, I'll just start mentioning Bruce has raised his hand. Bruce, does that mean you want to talk? Okay, Bruce, you might be able to talk now. No. can't hear you, Bruce, if you're trying to talk, sorry. So yeah, one more question. Pip, can you reuse indicators instead of creating from existing? Do you know that, Felix? I don't know.
That's a good question. I think what you mean is if you can share an indicator rather than duplicate.
Yep.
Let's check. No, you create from an existing. You recreate.
Right. Yeah, Pip, we'll probably have to look into that more closely. We're pretty much out of time. Thanks, Felix. That's terrific. You mentioned you don't know the timing of when this might become available.
Well, I cannot really guarantee because it's really up to the developers, but we are aiming for November. Let's just hope that there's no major bugs that we encounter that would delay it further. Yeah, November-ish.